In 1958, philosopher Isaiah Berlin gave a lecture at the University of Oxford titled Two Concepts of Liberty, probably one of the most influential and commented upon essays in political philosophy to have emerged in the last century. It provided a framework through which you can analyze the different attitudes towards liberty held by capitalists and communists. Berlin split liberty into two categories, negative and positive. As Berlin illustrated, these are not simply separate forms of liberty, rather they represent competing, incompatible interpretations of a political idea. Given that few people oppose liberty, the interpretation and definition of this term has significant political ramifications. First, let's look at what we mean by negative liberty. Negative liberty, also known as freedom from, as in freedom from interference or absence of external constraints, is a concept in political philosophy that emphasizes the absence of external obstacles or constraints on an individual's actions. It is a freedom from coercion by others or by the government. Negative freedom focuses on individual autonomy and the ability to make your own free choices and pursue your own interests without external constraints. It is often associated with the protection of individual rights and liberties, such as freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and freedom of assembly. Negative freedom does not imply the absence of all constraints, but rather the absence of constraints imposed by external forces that limit an individual's ability to act according to their own will. Negative freedom is therefore called negative, in that it does not require anything from anyone, but actually the opposite. It requires less of the government and society in order to promote individual freedom. In a capitalist framework, there tends to be a stronger emphasis on negative liberty, particularly the freedom from external interference, such as government regulation or control. Capitalists often argue that economic freedom, which allows individuals to pursue their economic interests without excessive government intervention, is essential for overall liberty. They emphasize individual autonomy and the ability to make your own choices in a free market as fundamental components of liberty. For example, you can buy and sell what you want, to whom you want, at whatever price you want. From this perspective, negative liberty aligns closely with capitalist ideals of free enterprise and limited government intervention in economic affairs. Overall, capitalists believe that negative freedom, by minimizing government intervention and restrictions, provides individuals with more freedom to pursue their own interests, make their own choices, and lead autonomous lives according to their own preferences and values. They argue that this form of freedom is essential for fostering individual autonomy, economic prosperity, and overall societal well-being. Capitalists do not therefore dictate how you should live or what you should do with your life. They just ensure that no one can force you not to pursue your own dreams. A communist might argue that capitalists don't care about the well-being of the people. However, a capitalist would argue that this is their greatest strength. For example, some common objections to negative freedom can be found in discussions about healthcare. For instance, critics may question how one can truly be considered free if they die from an easily treatable disease due to lack of money. This highlights a fundamental difference between the positive and negative concepts of freedom, and underscores the divergence between the two concepts. From a capitalist perspective, the responsibility for one's healthcare primarily falls on the individual rather than society. This is because in the capitalist ideology, it is not the government's role to compel individuals to take care of their health. Instead, capitalists often argue that individuals should take personal responsibility by obtaining health insurance, maintaining good health practices, or relying on support from family and friends. Additionally, they may advocate for voluntary contributions to healthcare through mechanisms such as donations to national health funds. This perspective stems from the belief that individual freedom should take precedent over societal obligations in a capitalist system. Essentially, what capitalists acknowledge is that there is no one right way to live, but you need to make those decisions by yourself, learn from your own mistakes, and get your own rewards from your own work. Basically, the individual is king, and society cannot dictate how you should live, or be forced to help you if you need it. Positive freedom, also known as freedom to, as in freedom to act or freedom to achieve, is a concept in political philosophy that emphasizes the ability of individuals to pursue their goals, aspirations, and self-realization. Unlike negative freedom, which focuses on the absence of external constraints, positive freedom emphasizes the presence of opportunities and resources that enable individuals to fulfill their potential and lead fulfilling lives. In the context of positive freedom, individuals have the capacity to actively pursue their interests and shape their own destinies. This includes access to education, healthcare, economic opportunities, and other resources that empower individuals to make meaningful choices and achieve their goals. Communist and socialist ideologies prioritize positive liberty, focusing on the collective well-being and social equality of the community. Communists argue that true freedom is achieved through the elimination of socio-economic inequalities and the provision of basic necessities for all individuals. They advocate for a more interventionist government that redistributes wealth and resources to ensure equal opportunities and outcomes for everyone. From this perspective, positive liberty is seen as essential for achieving social justice and enabling individuals to realize their full potential within a communal framework. Communists critique capitalist individualism, which prioritizes individual rights and freedoms, arguing that it leads to inequality, exploitation, and alienation. They advocate for a collective approach to decision-making and resource allocation, emphasizing solidarity, cooperation, and shared responsibility for the well-being of all members of the society. In this context, negative liberty, which emphasizes individual autonomy and freedom from external interference, may be seen as incompatible with communist ideals of collective ownership and decision-making. Communists believe in the necessity of a strong centralized state to oversee the transition to socialism and eventually communism. They see the state as a tool for implementing policies that promote the common good. In this context, negative liberty, which often implies limited government intervention and individual autonomy, may be seen as inadequate for achieving the transformative goals of communism. Overall, communists prioritize positive liberty over negative liberty due to their focus on collective welfare, social justice, and the pursuit of equality. While negative liberty may still be valued to some extent within communist societies, it is typically subordinate to the broader goals of promoting social and economic rights, reducing inequality, and achieving collective well-being. The concepts of structure and agency are pivotal in grasping the essence of positive liberty. Genuine freedom for a communist entails an individual's capacity to pursue their ambitions devoid of the constraints imposed by social frameworks. Discrimination in its many forms, including classism, sexism, ageism, ableism, and racism, can pose formidable barriers to personal freedom, curtailing opportunities and stifling the potential for self-actualization. However, with regards to positive liberty, Berlin and other philosophers have highlighted two potential paradoxes that they believe lead to a slippery slope to authoritarianism. The paradox of positive liberty is a concept in political philosophy that highlights a potential tension between individual freedom and collective goals or social justice. It stems from the idea that while positive liberty aims to empower individuals to pursue their goals and self-realization, it may also require restrictions on individual freedoms in order to achieve broader societal objectives. The paradox arises from the fact that in order to ensure equal access to opportunities and resources for all members of society, there may need to be limitations on certain individual freedoms or actions that could impede the realization of these collective goals. For example, affirmative action policies aimed at addressing systematic inequalities or promoting social justice may require regulations or redistributive measures that restrict some individuals' freedom to accumulate wealth or to pursue their personal interests, without regard for the well-being of others. Socialists would counter-argue that in capitalist societies, individuals may experience constraints on their freedom due to economic inequality, exploitation, and lack of access to essential resources such as healthcare, education, and housing. They contend that capitalism perpetuates a system in which the freedom of the wealthy and powerful is prioritized over that of the majority, leading to a paradoxical situation where negative freedom is achieved, but at the expense of positive freedom for the majority of the people. The second slippery slope highlighted by Berlin is the concept of the divided self. It illustrates the internal conflict individuals experience between their rational moral self, referred to as the higher self, and their instinctual, impulsive desires, referred to as the lower self. This internal struggle can be demonstrated with a scenario such as smoking, where individuals may recognize the health risks associated with the habit attributed to the higher self, but succumb to the cravings for nicotine attributed to the lower self. The next step down the slippery slope towards authoritarianism consists in pointing out that some individuals are more rational than others, and can therefore know best what is in their and other people's rational interests. Berlin wrote that individuals who perceive themselves as more rational or morally superior may believe they know what is best for themselves and others. Consequently, they may justify imposing their perceived rational interests on others under the guise of liberating them from their mere irrational desires. As an example, in Western societies, by banning smoking to promote health, or in the case of the Soviet Union, by persecuting religions because the Communist Party was convinced atheists were considered to be more politically astute and virtuous individuals. Despite what you personally think about smoking or religion, do you think a government has a right to tell others what is best for them? Capitalists think that self-development can only come from within, not to mention the infringement upon negative liberty. In this context, the divided self not only illustrates the internal conflict individuals face, but also sheds light on how this conflict can lead to authoritarian tendencies. The rationalization of imposing one's perceived rational interests on others, despite potential resistance, underscores the complex interplay between individual autonomy and the pursuit of collective goals within the framework of positive liberty. Supporters of positive liberty might argue that individuals are not isolated entities, but are shaped by their social context and relationships. They would acknowledge the existence of internal conflicts and the divided self, but argue that these conflicts are influenced by external factors such as societal norms, cultural values, and power structures. They would stress the importance of addressing social inequalities and power structures that limit an individual's ability to pursue their goals and self-realization. Because the concept of negative freedom concentrates on the external sphere in which individuals interact, it seems to provide a better guarantee against the dangers of authoritarianism perceived by Berlin. To promote negative freedom is to promote the existence of a sphere of action within which the individual is sovereign, and within which they can pursue their own projects subject only to the constraints that they respect the spheres of others. Individuals, like plants, says Berlin, must be allowed to grow in the sense of developing their own faculties to the full and according to their own inner logic. Personal growth is something that cannot be imposed from without, but must come from within the individual. Berlin did not advocate for the outright rejection of the concept of positive liberty. Instead, he acknowledged it as one of several important human values essential to a free society. Berlin asserted that positive liberty was indeed a valid and significant form of liberty, as long as it was defined in terms of individual autonomy rather than the pursuit of a predetermined goal that individuals should or rationally ought to desire. For example, a rational person should not be religious. Overall, Berlin's perspective suggests that a balanced approach that incorporates elements of both positive and negative liberty is necessary to safeguard individual freedom and promote a just and equitable society. In the context of economic systems, both capitalism and communism have been critiqued for their limitations in fully realizing individual freedom. Capitalism, with its emphasis on free markets and limited government intervention, can lead to inequalities of wealth and power that restrict the freedom of those marginalized by economic disparities. On the other hand, communism, with its focus on collective ownership and central planning, can result in restrictions on individual autonomy and freedom of choice. From Berlin's perspective, a purely capitalist or communist system may not fully satisfy the requirements of freedom because they prioritize one form of liberty, either positive or negative, at the expense of the other. Instead, a mixed economy that combines elements of both capitalism and socialism may offer a more balanced approach to promoting freedom. This mixed economy could incorporate mechanisms for ensuring economic opportunity and social welfare while also protecting individual rights and freedoms.